starting off from a clear assumption in this video that disclosure is real. It's a real thing. We've seen releases, drops of information by the government. Now what are we supposed to do with that? Non-human intelligence, or NHI, it's not fantasy anymore. It's becoming something that we have to find a way to put in our world and place there. Something has been interacting with humanity, and all the old categories that we've tried are breaking down. You know, I've talked before about how we as human beings love to put things into boxes. You know, we have categories for everything: race, religion, sexuality, everything. What is your job? Are you blue collar, white collar, no collar? These boxes are no longer sufficient for what we're getting ready to try to deal with. The question is no longer simply, is something there? The better question, and it's always been, but especially now, is what kind of reality are we living in? And maybe even more important, what kind of beings are we becoming as we confront it? Most people immediately reach for familiar categories. Oh, there's aliens from another planet. There's angels. There's demons. I'm sure that you've heard there's things from another planet, interdimensional beings, time travelers, spiritual entities. You know, you probably have heard so many of the pastors, especially in the more fundamentalist sects of really all religions, say these things, they're demons. We're so familiar with boxes that it's really hard for us to work and live and navigate in a world without those boxes. What the hell will we do when our boxes no longer describe reality? Every culture names reality through the language that it has available to us at the time. 500 years ago, advanced technology would have looked like magic. 2,000 years ago, an interdimensional intelligence might have been described in religious language. Today, we use scientific language: dimensions, quantum fields, consciousness, frequency, non-human intelligence. What are these things? They're simply reality. They're what we have in front of us. And maybe the boxes that we're used to just aren't going to be sufficient anymore. What makes this movement different is that disclosure is moving from fringe culture into public conversation. We've got government hearings, military witnesses, whistleblowers. Pilots are describing objects that behave beyond any known capability. We've got conversations about recovered materials, although we haven't seen them yet, but we've heard a lot about them, and there's a lot of smoke at that fire. Conversations about biological entities, or non-human intelligence, or transdimensional beings. What is that? What the hell is a transdimensional being? I don't know. Once upon a time, we would have called them angels. Did they do something nice for us? They were good. Did they do something bad to us? They were demons. I don't think the boxes that we are using are going to be of any use anymore. This isn't about science fiction. If we only keep and treat it as a technological story, we might miss the deeper part of it. So here's the first trap: reducing everything to hardware. A lot of people want and they need the simple version. They don't understand anything more complex because their world hasn't been designed so that it makes sense to them. Show me the craft, show me the body, show me the engine, show me the classified. Yes, physical evidence matters. But what if this phenomenon is not only physical? What if it's always had a psychological, symbolic, spiritual, religious, and consciousness component? That would explain why the topic seems to overlap with dreams, visions, synchronicities. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist from the beginning of the 20th century, was famous for him talking about flying saucers as a spiritual phenomenon. It's not because everything is the same, but because the human mind might be part of the interface. Let me say that again. These things overlap, not because they're the same, but because the human mind might be part of the universe, the interface itself. There's a second trap: forcing old labels too quickly. Yeah, some people say demons, some angels, some just, especially in the secular world, say they're just extraterrestrials. But I think we really need to slow down. A name is not an explanation. Calling something an angel or a demon might tell us more about the observer's worldview than it does the thing itself. The serious path is discernment. Not panic, not worship, not denial. Discernment. And this is where the ancient traditions become useful. Not because they give us a simple UFO manual. They don't. But because they've studied consciousness, extraordinary experience, spiritual powers, visions, and non-ordinary realities. And religions have done this for thousands of years. It is ingrained in our bones. Trying to understand the world when we are faced with a mystery. Therefore, we create boxes. It's good, but it's also a bad thing because they put blinders on us for what might really be there. They developed warnings and maps. They developed practices for remaining stable when reality becomes strange. And that might be exactly what we need now. And that might be exactly what we need now. So let me take you back a few thousand years ago into something called the Vedic tradition. It's one of many, many options. All sorts of shamanistic and religious practices have this, but a fundamental truth that we're now able to see through science and quantum mechanics. And the big question is reality simply a function of consciousness and vibration? In the Vedic traditions, reality is not understood as dead matter. Reality instead is saturated with consciousness, with awareness, with knowing. And we'll get into both the Eastern and the Western equivalents of that now. Sound, mantra, vibration, singing, awareness are treated as foundational. The phrase "not a Brahman" points to the universe as vibration or sound. That does not mean that we should casually say modern physics proves every mystical claim, but it does mean that ancient people were asking profound questions about the relationship between mind, body, vibration, and reality. The sutras, the Patanjali sutras, are filled with this. The Rig Veda, the songs from India are incredible at creating a profound state of awareness. And that becomes very relevant if NHI or non-human intelligence are not merely traveling through space, but interacting through consciousness. The idea in the Vedas that there are 4 sound levels is especially interesting. That which is spoken aloud, the audible language, the madhyama, or the mental sound, the language before speech. Pashanti is a deeper visionary level, where meaning is seen or perceived before it becomes ordinary language. Para is the unmanifest source. Whether we take this literally, symbolically, or spiritually, it gives us a model of reality moving from subtle to manifest, from the very small to the macro level. And that matters, because the disclosure phenomenon often seems to blur that line. Physical objects, mental impressions, dreamlike encounters, telepathic communication, symbolic experience. The phenomenon may not neatly fit into our materialist categories. This is also why things like remote viewing are starting to pop up, and they've been doing so since the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, when during the Cold War there was actually a psychic Cold War, and we had remote viewing. This is why remote viewing has started to come up in the disclosure movement. It's beginning to circle around the topic, what in my day, long ago, would have been called astral projection, the ability to send your mind or your astral body or your spirit or what have you out into the world and to see and perceive and understand what is there. Whether somebody accepts every claim or not about remote viewing or what have you, the fact is that intelligence communities have explored this topic, and they did so for decades, and we think they're still doing it now. As a matter of fact, we think it's been refined. But of course, we wouldn't know that now, would we? We aren't going to be told that. There's long been an interest in whether consciousness can see beyond the ordinary senses, the taste, the sight, the hearing, the smell, the touch. Is there more than just this? The philosophers, Descartes, for example, famously said, "I think, therefore I am." It wasn't just a matter of perceiving, although some philosophers really did go into the objective senses, but rather being able to comprehend reality somehow makes it. Now, I'm stretching that a little bit. Descartes wouldn't have said that, but I'm just drawing him out to a logical, more modern conclusion. If disclosure is real and non-human intelligences are real, then consciousness might not be a side issue. It may be central. The interface between us and the universe might not just be radar, where we create a sound, it bounces off, and it comes back to us, whether it's sound, light, what have you. That's not consciousness. That's not the interface. The interface might be awareness itself. Now, let me swing over briefly to the Christian mysticism and Christian spirituality. In my tradition, the Christian tradition, it gives us a different but equally important warning. The saints were not naive about extraordinary experiences, not at all. St. Ignatius, St. John of the Cross, they've all written about visions, ecstasies, voices, levitation, consolations, and spiritual sweetness. But the mature mystics repeatedly say, don't chase the experience. Don't confuse the sign of God with standing in the presence of God. Don't assume that every luminous thing is holy. Don't assume that every powerful thing is good. And don't assume that every frightening thing is evil. Fright comes from in here, not necessarily out there. Discern the fruit. St. Paul said it over and over and over again, and St. Ignatius said this in his spiritual exercises over and over again. Discern the fruit. What is the fruit of the thing that you are observing? Is it peace? Is it harmony? Is it contemplation? Is it quiet? Is it a fundamental, profound joy that says, yes, I'm standing where I need to be? Or does it rile you up? This is how you understand things. This is one way of moving out of our boxes into a wider world where we can see what might be going on. St. Ignatius of Loyola, he was a medieval soldier. He always wanted to be a soldier. He was tough. He was very kind of in your face, but he loved God. But he loved the idea of being famous or power more, perhaps. And he went through a transformation. I won't get into it. It's very long. But St. Ignatius of Loyola gives us a practical rule. He says, pay attention to what an experience produces. Does it lead to humility? Does it lead to love? Does it lead to clarity? Does it lead to service? Or does it lead to obsession, pride, fear, confusion, and isolation? That may be one of the most useful spiritual tests for the disclosure era. So what is it that we are experiencing as we're going through this? Look for the fruits. Another Christian saint, St. John of the Cross, he said, don't cling to spiritual fireworks. He warns against attachments to spiritual sweetness because, trust me, even though you might be in the throes of ecstasy, praising God or Allah or Vishnu or whatever or whoever it is that you are worshiping, that's not going to last. Spiritual sweetness comes and it goes. There has to be more fundamental place for us to stand so that we're not being swept in and out with the tides. If we don't find some solid rock to stand on, we're going to go down. We're going to get knocked down by life when the spiritual sweetness ebbs and life comes rolling in on us and really challenges us. The fact that he says, be careful about attachment to spiritual sweetness, that phrase matters, because even a real experience can become a trap. A person can become addicted to visions, addicted to fear, addicted to secret knowledge, addicted to feeling, I am chosen, addicted to being closer to the hidden truth than everyone else. That's not awakening. That's ego wearing a cosmic costume. Do you think God is going to be impressed by our love of the visions that he gives us? They aren't given us to make us feel good. They're given us to teach us something. How will we know whether the lesson is valuable, whether it's from God or E.T.? Discernment, discernment, discernment. So if disclosure is real, the response cannot be denial, but it also can't be panic. The phenomenon might be technological. I don't know. I suspect there's technological parts of it, but I don't know. It also can't be panic. And it can't be a spiritual thrill-seeking. It might be interdimensional. Maybe, well, we know there's more than just these three dimensions, and time includes a fourth, perhaps. It might be spiritual. It might be all of these things in ways we don't understand yet. And so that's why I'm saying, hang on, don't put it in a box yet. Look, discern, taste the fruits, wait. In part 2, I want to go deeper into the religious and mystical map, or boxes, if you will, if you really need a box. I'm going to be supplying some extra ones. Across the Vedic, Buddhist, Christian, Islamic traditions, the message is surprisingly consistent. What is that message? Well, part of it is our culture. Jesus, Krishna, Muhammad, all of these things. But those are the lenses, and we need to take them off and realize that the message that is consistent across all these traditions is the goal is not power. The goal is transformation. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this talk. Trust me, it's going to get a lot deeper. Thank you, and remember to be good.